Released in 1996, Mega Man X3 is the final game in the series to grace the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, as the rest of the series would migrate over to the Sony PlayStation for the next couple of entries. As such, even finding a loose copy of the game is not only extremely difficult due to its rarity, but also very costly. Expect to pay in the triple digits if you're looking to get a physical game pack. Otherwise, the Mega Man X Legacy Collection, Volume 1, is a safer and cheaper bet. Mega Man X3 pits our eponymous hero and his recently resurrected partner Zero against the maverick forces of Dr. Doppler, a Reploid doctor who has gone bad because of course he did, and then spoiler, turns out he's working for Sigma because of course he did. So 2 games in, you know the deal. Play an introductory level to get yourself acclimated to the game's controls, as well as a brief segment playing as Zero, more on this later, and then play through any of the 8 Maverick levels in any order you wish, run through them, beat the boss, gain their weapons, before moving on to the final set of Doppler levels or Sigma levels, whatever you want to call them. After killing 2 Mavericks, you'll then have to contend with public nuisances Bit and Bite at random levels while steering off course to find a mysterious capsule that will teleport you to a mysterious level where you'll face off against the mystery. It's vile. It's vile. The Mandalorian Boba Fett ripoff Maverick thing from the first game, it's just vile. It's a nice surprise at least. They brought back Vile. They try to make him like a recurring secondary villain. Wondering where he shows up next. Oh, Mega Man X8. When did that... okay, never mind. So as I tossed out casually, Mega Man X3 is the first time you play as Zero, your trusted ally and the robot you're supposed to destroy down the line to save humanity. Sorry if I spoiled the ending for anybody. Nobody's playing these anymore. I wonder how long I could keep that. Never mind. That's not. No one's gonna care. Anyway, Zero isn't all that different from X in this initial outing, boasting the same running, jumping, shooting, dashing, wall climbing moveset as his blue bombing counterpart. In addition, he also has a much longer health meter, compared to X initially at least. He has the double shot ability X had in the second game, along with a Z-Saber attack that kills most enemies in a single blow, or at least does considerable damage. Not a bad choice for a novice player, I suppose, except not really. See, Zero isn't a fully playable character here, he's more of a backup character that you swap with X to get the load off. More than what he can do, it's what he cannot do that defines Zero's role in this game. Zero cannot use special weapons or sub-tanks. He cannot collect 1-ups or energy to restore sub-tanks. He cannot access armor capsules, and when he approaches a boss door or even a sub-boss door, he automatically tags out and you're back to playing as X. Not only that, but Zero can only be summoned once per stage, and once he meets his demise, that's it. Zero's gone for good for the rest of the game, which alters the ending somewhat and also affects your ability to obtain another upgrade to your Buster, which I'll leave fairly vague, but I'm sure footage of it will show up in the video, because I'm not really... The idea is that Zero is more of a backup player early on to get you through the trouble spots during the time when X is severely underpowered. He'll do some heavy lifting for some of the common bits, but eventually X will have to take the lead and tackle the graver threats. Once X becomes fully enhanced with master weapons, heart containers, and armor upgrades, Zero's usefulness practically hits zero, no pun intended. To give you an idea of how useful I found Zero to be in my playthroughs of X3, I spent more time talking about Zero in this video than I actually used him in the game. Make of that what you will. Beyond that, it's business as usual in Mega Man X3. After the intro level that lets you sample the controls and Zero for possibly the only time you'll be using him, don't worry, he'll get the shine later on down the road. You've got your 8 stages of the usual fare, blasting through enemies, going through terrain, finding these empty boss rooms in the middle of the road, then facing off against the actual Maverick boss and killing them to acquire their weapons, lather, rinse, repeat, all that jazz. And of course, across these levels you'll encounter upgrades to your paltry hero. Upgrades that you will need because this time the opposition hurts so bad they make X cry like a mighty number 9 backer on release day. Yeah, apparently there were complaints that the last 2 games were way too easy. So Capcom decided that we're gonna spam these levels with a ton of enemies, and a good, 85-90% of the Maverick population in this game has some sort of projectile or long-range attack. Add to that their high tolerance for pain, and you've got a game that requires you to take your time to survey the land because there might be trouble. and Trouble usually takes 1 billion hits to die per unit, and Trouble usually hits like a brick and can kill you in a couple of hits, and eventually, Trouble gets a bit boring. It also doesn't help that X3 isn't quite as exciting as the previous 2 games and doesn't have any particularly thrilling moments. Look, Mega Man X had the intro level where you kill an airship and the bridge goes crumbling down. You kill this enemy in the watchtower and the glass shatters. What? Oh, fuck off. We've been past those games for years. Why are you even still here? Riding down the mines or getting past this crab thing? Mega Man X2 has you trying to keep this gimmick from crushing the walls on you, outrunning an erupting lava flow, speeder bikes, avoiding this thing to keep this robot from assimilating battle data. What does Mega Man 3 have going for it? You go up a slow-moving elevator. Twice. You go up a shaft of spikes by riding slow-climbing snails. You punch a bunch of boxes. You avoid falling balls. This red dude with the 2 balls and chains that shows up every other level. That's all I could come up with off the top of my head. There's some slow-moving walls. That's something, I guess, and you have to outrun a exploding building or something, except not really, but yeah. Okay, tangent over. So aside from the usual assortment of heart containers, sub-tanks, and armor upgrades that you expect to get from every Mega Man X game, there are 2 new sets of upgrades, Ride Armors and Enhancement Chips. Ride Armors are the mech things that made an appearance or 2 in the previous X games, and were there so you could smash other mech things in the face. I didn't mention them in the previous videos because they're just a gimmick, a means to an end, and they remain so here but to a much lesser degree. Mega Man X3 gives you 4 that you could play with, but only when you acquire the base model can you actually use the variants. 2 of these armors are from previous games, and 2 are brand new, and have new features and projectiles and stuff. I'd go into more detail, but truth be told I hardly ever use the armors unless I need one to reach some other upgrade somewhere, or if I need a bullet shield to take the abuse while I traverse some area ill-suited for a mech that size. And in the case of the latter scenario, that's assuming I even remember to go out of my way to find the platform to summon these things. I guess that's why X4 left the Ride Armors as situational gimmicks as opposed to something you could summon whenever you want because, well, they're better suited as situational gimmicks and whatever, but that's just me, I suppose. And then there's the chip enhancements, special chips that will enhance your armor abilities even further. Once again, X needs to get 4 parts for a new set of armor. These parts grant X an improved air dash, including the ability to dash upwards, which is a big help for the vertical segments. Increased resistance to damage thanks to a protective barrier that pops up whenever X takes a hit. A map screen that shows you the lay of the land and where possible upgrades are located at the beginning of each stage and no other time, but it's a step up at least. And finally, the worst buster upgrade in the history of the universe. It's a double charge shot, much like in X2, except this time, the first shot is a slow-moving string of marbles, and if you launch the second shot into the marbles, they'll turn into a spread shot of slow-moving charge shots. I don't like this very much. I never found much use for it. Even the X1 charge with the dozen pink bullets is a better charge shot than this. But anyways, back to the chips. At some point, X will encounter these pink capsules containing said enhancement chips to increase your armor's ability even further, whether it be a double air dash, further resistance to damage, self-regenerating health at a standstill, or instant charge shots. The caveat is that only one of these chips can be installed, and once you've chosen, you're stuck with it until the end of time because life is cruel. So you'll have to choose what. Actually, don't go for the chips. Play Doppler Stage 1, be sure to have full health when you go down this shaft, step into the capsule to get the gold armor, which gives you all 4 chips hassle-free. Done. Once you discover this armor and how to get it, there's no reason to go after the chips, ever. It's the closest the Super Nintendo will get to seeing some sort of ultimate armor or whatever. Unfortunately, you don't get to retain the gold armor in any passwords. So you have to get it every time, much like the Street Fighter moves in the previous games. So they give you these things to find, and it often feels like they're not to add functionality to the game beyond, I need this to break some wall somewhere so I could get some sub-tank somewhere, but rather they're there to give the player something to do. X3 is like, hey, you like looking for things. Now every stage has 3 things to look for. Please enjoy! It just feels like a complete waste of time, especially if you find a shaft somewhere that you're hoping leads to a capsule or a heart container, and instead it's a rider platform that you can't even use because you don't have any ride armor. Lame. Much like in X2, after downing 2 Mavericks, you're introduced to Bit and Byte, essentially the X-Hunters of this game, that will appear one after the other. Unlike in X2, where the X-Hunter fights were usually stashed away from the main path and are entirely optional, you have to fight Bit and Byte, as their boss rooms are smack in the middle of a level. Those empty rooms that, pop up out of nowhere, that's where they'll usually fight you. Now, it's not a problem though. You beat them, and they'll go away, and when you reach the Doppler stage, you'll face them again, they'll team up and turn into a thing. However, if you have their weakness weapon that kills them, you'll face another boss if you kill them both. Same deal with File. He's an optional boss, however, you could skip entirely, and you'll fight him in his super mech later down the road in the Doppler stage. But if you kill him with the weakness weapon, you'll get a different boss and an extra sub-boss for Zero to fight, and yeah, that's as far as I'll go. Oh my, so... so I've said quite a bit, haven't I? And from the general quibbles that I've laid out for a good chunk of time, it might come across thinking that this is a bad game. And it's not. There's stuff there that I don't care for, and it actively takes away from the fun factor a bit. But despite all the stuff that I don't care for, at the end of the day, it's still a Mega Man X game on the Super Nintendo. The core gameplay hasn't changed, it's still fairly solid. The controls haven't changed in the slightest, they're still fairly tight and responsive, they work. And while the levels aren't the greatest assembled, the boss fights are pretty thrilling. A bit broken if you use their weakness weapon, they get stunned. But if you want good fights, you'll get them here. There's a couple of good fights in there. And the weapons aren't too shabby for the most part either. Triad Thunder's a nice shield thunder beam thing. Ray Splasher's a neat little Gatling gun thing. You got a yo-yo that's useful if you know how to use it. There's some good things in X3. There's also a lot of pointless things in X3 that usually overshadows everything else, and that's what we spent more time on, unfortunately. Mega Man X3 looks like a Mega Man X game on the Super Nintendo. Again, I don't know what else you want me to tell you. The graphics are somewhat colorful with some nice background effects here and there. The settings are consistent yet diverse. The enemy design is, I gotta say, somewhat limited compared to what came before. Again, this ball and chain dude is the one constant in the universe. There is some minor terrain changes when you clear stages similar to what happens in X1. For example, in one level you have these boxes, and after you beat another level, the boxes are gone. In one level you punch boxes being boarded onto a ship, and after you beat another level there are no more boxes to be had. It's something, I guess. And then there are some neat CX4 powered wireframe gimmicks here and there, most notably on the weapon get screen. Other than that, it's a Mega Man X game on the SNES. It looks fine, it animates well enough, and while there's rare occasions of slowdown, it's nowhere near as prominent of an issue as it was in X2, so that's another high point for X3, I think. The soundtrack kicks ass, though. I've heard some people say the music in X3 was the weakest of the bunch, but honestly, better than X2 at least, but not as good as X1. It's middle of the road. There's plenty of great tunes that range from highly energetic metal riffs, Gravity Beetle, Volt Catfish, Blast Hornet, I think, for a couple examples. And there's slower melodies that add to the tense atmosphere, such as Blizzard Buffalo, or a couple of the intermission cutscenes. And yeah, after a while they start to blur together since they all boast a similar sound, the guitar sound. But at the very least, they're good tunes, they're good melodies, they're not Wheelgator, and they get the job done. Sound effects are sound effects of X. They also get the job done. They're not bad, they're not good, they're just there at this point. And so overall, Mega Man X3, it's a mixed bag, leaning upwards. That's just how I see it. Look, at worst, it is a perfectly adequate follow-up to the previous two games that maintains the tight controls, the solid gameplay, the ability to upgrade, the atmosphere, the intensity, but everything beyond that is the equivalent of shit being tossed to a wall, catching what doesn't stick on that wall, and turn that into a video game. There's just so much stuff that feels pointless and superfluous, padding for the sake of padding. That, along with the obnoxious enemy placement and somewhat less than stellar level design, makes X3 the weakest of the SNES trilogy, but not necessarily the worst in the X run, because we're still a way long ways from that. At best, Mega Man X3 is still a perfectly fine Mega Man X game, and the core elements that made the past two games great still hold up in this third entry. I might not like a lot of what this game offers or does, but setting all that aside, it's still pretty solid stuff that's fun to play if you're willing to put up with its quirks. Not great, but still good enough. And that's really all I've got to say about that.